Hi, everybody. Welcome, and thank you so much for joining us for our monthly free public education webinar, which right now is focusing a lot on parenting in the digital age. Although we say it's mostly for parents, it's really for all of us because we're going to present some information that applies not just to children, but to adults as well. We love having the chat open for questions. We'll do a live Q&A at the end of the program tonight, and we are scheduled to go from 6 to 8 p.m. We will be recording this, and tomorrow we will send out the slides as well as the video. So if you can't stay for the full time, that's fine. You can make up for lost time later. And we ask that we keep the chat relatively quiet. Feel free to pop in questions, but we don't want to be a distraction to those who are listening into the program. So use it judiciously. And I'm going to start a screen share with us. Okay, Mary Anne, can you give me a nod when you see that? All right. So again, our slides will be available to you tomorrow. And anything that we see with underlines throughout are active links so that we say, don't take our word on any of this. Get to know this information for yourself. So if there are areas that really pique your interest, go do the deep dive. And if anything we've put together to help you start that research is there for you, then by all means, jump right on in. Okay. So I'm going to turn this over momentarily to our wonderful co-host, Mary Anne Tierney. Mary Anne, I think I may need to come out of here for a second. I don't know if I gave you co-hosting privileges. One
Okay.
second. Let me just give Mary Anne co-hosting privileges. She and I got
And
to
those who
chatting
haven't
early
posted
on.
anything yet while Cece's doing that, if you can put in the chat where you're from, if you haven't already, that would be great. And if you have any burning questions that you want to make sure that we answer, that'd be awesome.
There we go. Okay, so we're going to go back to my slides and I will let Mary Anne take it over and introduce herself in just a moment.
Great. Cece, I'm really grateful for this opportunity to do this with you this evening. If you want to put the slide deck on, there you go. I have a background as a nurse and managing public health programs even before I became a nurse. And I'm currently the executive director of SafeTechNC. It's a nonprofit based in Asheville, North Carolina, sharing why and how to use technology safely. I'm also certified by the Building Biology Institute as an electromagnetic radiation specialist. And that basically means that I'm certified to go into people's homes and assess and help them mitigate 4 different types of electromagnetic fields or EMFs. And I have my own little consulting business to do that. I see my colleague, Shirley Jackson, here, who's also part of the Building Biology Institute. I'm really grateful and proud to be an ambassador as well with Screen Strong. And I see Emily and a number of our other Screen Strong colleagues. So, really grateful to have you all here this evening. And I'm as well an ambassador with the Phone Free School movement and have just been thrilled at the momentum that has been picking up all around the country for phone free schools. I'm currently back to school, back to nurse practitioner school, specifically to study and become a psych nurse practitioner because the effects of wireless radiation on mood have been stunningly clear to me. And we know that we have an epidemic of mental illness now among our youth. And so that is my calling. And it really stems initially from my son. And it was 15 years ago that I was first introduced to this issue in full when I started having some weird collection of symptoms, a cascade of symptoms, while I was working at a high-tech hospital in Asheville. And as I was examining the public health studies about how to heal, I was stunned at the profound effect on children. And because I was about to adopt a baby, at that moment, when I looked at the screen of the amount of wireless radiation coming into the baby brain, I knew that the rest of my professional life would change. And so my son, who is going to be 14 next week, continues to be my motivator for this work. And I'm grateful for Cece and her partnership to do this work with.
Oh, Mary Anne, thank you so much. You just stun me with everything that you accomplish and manage to get done for your family, your community, and for our world in general. So thank you so very much. I will do a brief introduction. My name is Cece Doucette. That MTPW just means I had the privilege of earning a master's in technical and professional writing from Northeastern University. And back when my kids were in school, we kept hearing about this 21st century classroom, and our school budgets had been cut to the bone year after year. And so, good doobie parents, we stepped up and started doing fundraising to get wireless infrastructure and iPads and Chromebooks and smartboards and all what we thought was going to help our kids get a leg up in the world. And then one night at book group, a girlfriend of mine who's an electrical engineer was reading a book called Zapped by Anne Louise Gittleman. And she started insinuating that there's something biologically up with wireless. So that's when I fell down the rabbit hole on this. And I just made a mental note of it. But not long after that, I saw back in 2012 that the American Academy of Environmental Medicine put out a position statement to school superintendents saying, please don't let Wi-Fi into the schools. And I thought, well, what is this? So being a tech writer, I thought, is there any science? And I was astounded to find literally thousands of peer-reviewed studies all over the world. And we'll walk you through the science tonight. So long story short, I raised this conversation with my schools, and we became the first in the nation to even have this little sign hanging in our classrooms. Turn off the Wi-Fi when not in use. Turn off the devices when not in use, and always place the devices on a solid surface, not on your body. So that was my beginning. And then I worked with my state senator to introduce legislation to look at this. I met her for local coffee hours at literally a coffee shop, and I measured her cell phone and her district director's laptop, and both devices went way off the charts. And she's looking at me like, really? And I said, yes. And nobody knows. I said, this is going to be like, drugs, alcohol, tobacco, pornography, gambling. People, adults, have the right to choose, but aren't we morally obliged to protect our collective children? So she put me with an attorney in her office, and together we wrote legislation that would just bring the right minds together at the state level and look at this issue and then decide what to do. Well, it's been 10 years now, and here in Massachusetts, we've gotten some of our bills out of committee, but then they go to the next committee and then they just fade away at the end of the session. But we're excited about what was done in New Hampshire, and we'll tell you more about that tonight too. Um, One of the world's leading scientists, Dr. Deborah Davis, who founded the Environmental Health Trust, she reached out, or one of my colleagues in the UK reached out to her to ask if they could reference her work. She's got a great database in this little course that he was developing with his wife. And she said, absolutely, if anything I've done can help you, go for it. And then she said, you might want to talk to this woman, Cece Doucette in Massachusetts, and this scientist, Dr. Mikko Ahonen in Finland. And so the four of us got together. We had this miraculous little window of opportunity where we were all between work commitments. And so we hit it hard, and we created a little course that can be completed online, literally in about an hour. So we have off-the-shelf training to go right now to train our schools, to train our municipalities, to train our families, to train our workforce. So we are so far ahead of where we were a decade ago when some of us really started figuring this out. And then this scientist, Dr. Deborah Davis, brought a panel of world-leading experts to our state house. And for 2 years, I had been researching this on my own, and it was just so validating to go to our state house to a standing room only forum and talk about this issue. And Dr. Davis brought with her Frank Clegg, who's the retired president of Microsoft Canada. And I'm sitting there going, whoa, there's a captain of industry telling us that this is not safe. She brought one of the world's leading scientists from India. She brought Dr. Catherine Steiner Adair, who's a child psychologist who lectures all over the world. And this forum was back in 2016. And even at that time, Dr. Steiner Adair was saying, everywhere I go, kindergarten teachers, first grade, second grade, they're telling us that these children are coming to school now expecting their teachers to be edutainers. And when something doesn't go right, they lose their little minds and they can't pull it back together. And so Dr. Steiner Adair said, the areas of the brain where math and science are developing, we're still at that point developing on point. But the areas of the brain that make us human, all of our interpersonal items, we're not developing on point. The right to have empathy when somebody wipes out on the playground and run over and pick them up and help them get to the nurse's office, they're losing those skills or they're just not developing it. So it was amazing for me to be invited to this forum at the State House. And the reason I got invited is because I did get legislation here in Massachusetts, and that's how they found me. And then somebody down at the National Institutes of Health found my work and asked me to co-chair the technology panel for the Health and Buildings Roundtable Conference. And again, we had another team of experts there talking for the first time about the biological effects of today's technology. So I've been presented with these incredible opportunities. And one of the major gaps that we had is that we could see people were starting to develop these illnesses and our doctors didn't know about it and we had no way to train them. So I'm so very grateful for the Electromagnetic Fields Medical Conference from 2021. And just a little bit on the alphabet soup in this work. EMF stands for electromagnetic fields. That's the airborne pulsation of all this man-made energy that comes from the antennas in our stuff. And those are radio frequency microwave antennas that are mounted all over our devices. So if you hear RF, that means radio frequency. If you hear EMF, that means electromagnetic field. If you hear microwave sickness, it's all the same thing. It's these man-made energies that we've been creating that we now know are not biologically safe for us. So I had the privilege of collaborating with Mary Anne at the EMF Medical Conference. I presented on state and local policy. She also presented, and then we did role playing to give an example. I got to play Debbie Downer. So I was like this really sick person who'd been through every doctor I could find and I couldn't get myself better. So Mary Anne, with her kind, loving approach, said, well, how about if you start creating a sleep sanctuary? And we're going to walk you through all that tonight too. So it's been my privilege and honor to work with Mary Anne on that and other projects and to be here with her tonight. I'm so glad she accepted my invitation to co-host with me. So that's my story. And I share that because I'm just you. I just got a pretty good head start on you. And if anything that we have learned over the last decade can help you to connect the dots that much more quickly and start protecting your loved ones, then we'll consider today a success. All right. So I too am an ambassador with Screen Strong, and I know Susan and I had a great conversation recently, and she's joining us tonight too. So thank you to Screen Strong for putting this out. Mandy put this out on their forum as well to help people get in. So we're going to first talk about the overview of tech impacts, what it's doing to childhood development, what it's doing to digital dependency, radiation illnesses, and then we're going to talk about solutions because it's not all bad. We know what to do, but we need to empower you to feel comfortable making baby steps to get to a safer technology use. So there's always hope. We'll talk about those baby steps, and then Mary Ann's going to walk us through a tech Sabbath as well. Okay, so what does a child really need to properly develop? We can strip it down to 4 things. These little dudes need to move. They should not be sitting still all day. They need to be moving and exploring their environment through touch, tactile stimulation, not sitting in front of the shallows of a screen. They need meaningful human connection with their trusted adults, their family members, and their peers. and they also need time in nature. We are one of those little critters running around on this planet. Every living thing is meant to be connected to the Earth's natural electromagnetic field. It helps to regulate us. So, in a nutshell, that's where we should be focusing our children, right? But when we don't, when we have excessive technology use, this is what we see is happening. And this is a shout out to our wonderful colleague, Chris Rowan up in Canada, who did the Zone In programs. She's an occupational therapist. So when we spend so much of our time in front of screens like TVs, cell phones, and other internet devices, we develop habits that leave us in a sedentary lifestyle. We have all these people on the other end of the screen, but we're really isolating ourselves. We begin to feel neglected, our children feel neglected, and we get overstimulated by all this stuff that's coming at us all the time. And what does that lead to? Developmental delays and obesity, mental illness and detachment, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and autism. And physiologically, diabetes, stroke, heart attack, addiction, violence, perversion, all the sex addictions that are going on. Taking medication instead of taking care of ourselves, impulsiveness, illiteracy, and it's not sustainable. We're seeing our own death rate is going down. Our longevity rate is going down instead of getting stronger. A lot of people are not able to make or sustain relationships or get jobs. So this is doing a number on us societally, and we can't continue doing that. So how do we flip that? We get back to the basics. At the foundation, movement, touch, meaningful connection, and time in nature. That helps to regulate all of our biological systems here, right? So that we can be strong and coordinated, and we can be secure and regulated. We can be calm and focused instead of feeling jacked but exhausted. And that's what leads to optimal development, where a child can attend to the task in front of them and actually learn. This is how we sustain our society and our children. Okay. And as we all recognize, because we wouldn't have come together today if we didn't, this digital dependency has become a huge elephant in the room. It's overstimulating the pleasure centers of the brain. It's leading to poor academic performance, and it's impairing proper brain development, as I said, in those areas where we're supposed to be developing communication skills, empathy, creativity, problem solving, and, expanding our attention span, not watching it shrink before us. And then there's that self-control. And then, children, they don't even know to write their signature today. They're not developing their fine motor skills properly. So we got pushed into all this, all tech, all the time by industry in the ed tech industry. And now it's time to get that pendulum swung back to the middle, where as so many of our parental groups, like Screen Strong and the others, are recognizing that we got sold a bill of goods and this is tanking our kids. So, and then obesity. We can't just let kids sit around doing nothing and letting them eat junk food all day, right? And then one of our colleagues down in Louisiana is Dr. Holly Groh. She's a corneal surgeon, and she's the one who taught me about this epidemic of myopia that we're having. So as humans on the planet, we are meant to be scanning the horizon all the time for predators. That's what our eyeballs are supposed to be doing. That's what keeps them nice and round. When we spend hour after hour in the shallows of a screen, it's elongating our eyes, which is what myopia is. And now we have an epidemic of myopia in children and adults. So lots of great reasons to say, okay, I'm not just going to go with the flow anymore. I'm going to take charge of what I can take charge of. And we have some
Mhm.
pretty amazing tools to do that. A lot of communities are holding community conversations around this wonderful book that Dr. Jonathan Haidt out of NYU, New York University, he's a social
Social
psychologist. Social
psychologist. I'm sorry.
psychologist.
Yes, yeah, and it was actually Screen Strong that introduced lots of us to this book, and it's actually Dr. Height. I
Height,
know
I
it's
say
kind of
hate, sorry.
confusing. Yeah, and we're really grateful that so much of the science that Dr. Height has presented in his book
Mhm.
is also on the Screen Strong website, in the science section. Emily and Mandy and Melanie, who founded Screen Strong, have done a great job of compiling a lot of the science that Cece has been talking about. And
Yeah.
some of us have been holding book groups and
Mhm.
studies on this book. And by now it has swept the country, and we now have 17 US states that have created phone free policies
Yeah.
from bell to bell as a result of the momentum of this book. Probably, 90% of those happened or came about as a result of the discussions and
Mhm.
the learning from this book.
And it's fabulous. It's really empowering parents and schools to take that step back and go, wait, whoa, he's right. This has not served our families. So he talks about four foundational harms and what is happening when we started giving our kids screens back around 2012, and thereon. Social deprivation and spiritual degradation, sleep deprivation, attention fragmentation, and this digital addiction. And then he has four recommendations for what we can do. No smartphones before high school, and even then in small doses, right? No social media before 16. Phone-free schools so that the kids can pay attention, and more unsupervised play and childhood independence. This week, I turned on my television and PBS had this program called The Pony Boys. There were two boys, 9 and 11, like 50 years ago, that had a pony in a cart, and their mother let them go from Massachusetts up to Canada to go to, it was something like the World's Fair along those lines. And those little boys went all the way by themselves up to Canada. And the mom advertised it, and there were parade people coming out when these little boys went through. But how many of us would empower our children to do something so daring like that? And these kids had the time of their lives, right? And that's what he is saying. You don't have to send your kid to another country, but they need to be able to work it out for themselves. They need to problem solve. They need to use their brain to come up with ideas and do the goofy things that kids do, right? So we can learn a lot from that wonderful book. And then another one is Dr. Victoria Dunkley. She was one of our speakers at the first EMF medical conference back in 2019. And she is a psychiatrist, and she has coined the term electronic screen time. And so she's written this hands-on book with a 4-week plan to end meltdowns, raise grades, boost social skills by reversing the effects of electronic screen time. And I'll just go back.
She actually calls it, sorry, Cece, she calls it electronic screen syndrome.
Screen syndrome, yeah.
Right. It's not in the DSM, but it's still a great way to diagnose.
Mhm.
And what she finds is that, as Cece will, as Cece knows well, when children have that 4 week fast, often those symptoms can completely reverse themselves, if
Yeah.
not improve. And
And it's
Dr. Dunkley does. Go ahead, Cece. Sorry.
Yeah, it's fantastic for the whole family because it makes us all take a hard look at how often are we in front of screens? How often are we not paying attention to our children? Or we have divided attention, which scientifically we know you can't do 100% of two things at once. Um, so my one of my daughters, when she was in high school, started doing some of the boundary pushing that every kid is going to do. And I busted her and I took away her phone for a week. She's like, Mom, you can't do that. And I said, keep that up, young lady, and I'll give you 2 weeks. So I had my daughter for a week without any laptop, without any, cell phone other than what she had to use for school. And I will tell you, by the end of that 1 week, I had my sweet girl back. And it was amazing that peer pressure wasn't haunting her all the time. And so it can be done. And as intimidating as it sounds, what Dr. Dunkley says is take that first week and really think about active parenting and what you're going to do and put downtime into that schedule and tell everybody around your child, all the other parents, the aunts, the uncles, the grandparents, tell them that in the subsequent 3 weeks, there's to be no screens for my child. So they can't just slip up the street to their friend's house and get their fix, right? And by the end of that 4 week period, these families are so grateful to be back in step with one another, and their children's brains have begun to recover and they're all calming way down. So lots of great solutions that we're going to share with you all tonight. So where does the American Academy of Pediatrics stand? Well, they have a family media use plan. And for, years ago, they started saying no screen time before 2 years of age because the brain is going through such rapid development. You don't want them in front of a screen. Maybe they can sit on your lap and talk to grandma on the screen, but it should be interactive with a trusted adult, right? And then older children, only 1 to 2 hours per day. And that should include what's going on at school, not just at home, but everything. So they have this family media use plan, and it gets everyone to the kitchen table. You all can sit down and decide what your family plan is going to look like. So you get that early buy-in. And then you also have, well, if somebody slips, what are the consequences? So everybody knows from today forward, here's how our family is going to operate with technology. And when your friends come in the house, this is how they are welcome to interact with our family too. Okay. Um, so that's kind of
Casey,
the,
can I
yeah.
add, just as we're kind of shifting to wireless radiation, when the National Toxicology Program um, released its gold standard study in 2016 that found clear evidence of carcinogenesis, and we're going to give you some resources for that in a little bit. The AAP almost immediately came out and released cell phone safety guidelines. So I'm going to be putting in the chat a handout that's called Safe Tech Tips, and it's gonna have those recommendations from the AAP on that. And as someone said in the chat, we know that. Thank you, Emily. The AAP is also funded by big tech, and so they have been far more hesitant on this issue recently than in the past. But we want to keep using the good stuff that they
That's
put out
it.
years ago.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mary Ann. And I look forward to that. I will drop that into my slides for next time too. Okay, so for the remainder of our presentation, we're going to talk about what wireless radiation is and give you the science, we'll give you the medicine, and we will give you things that you could do today to start taking baby steps to protect yourself. We're going to give a fine look at the fine print that comes in all of our devices warning us. We'll give you a demonstration on what this radiation looks like. We'll help you kind of frame up what are these radio frequencies, and then we'll talk about the long-term science, the short-term science, and kind of step back and go, well, where is all this stuff? So we'll identify some sources of exposure. And then we'll take a look at why we don't know about this. There's some pretty interesting facts there. And most importantly, we're going to talk about solutions. And anybody who's with us right now, I invite you, if you have an iPhone, to take it out and go into settings. So take a second to do that. So on your iPhone, go into settings. And while you're getting there, just know, See the Fine Print is a web page that our friends at the Environmental Health Trust have, and it will cull out a bunch of these fine print warnings that have been in our devices all along. So from settings in an iPhone, go down just a little ways and hit General. Settings, then General. General, go all the way down to the bottom and hit Legal and Regulatory. And once you hit Legal and Regulatory on the next screen, about 4 down from the top, you'll see RF exposure. Radio frequency, microwave radiation that they politely call energy because it is a man-made energy form. It's invisible to us, but our brain and our cells know it's there. There's a big paragraph near the top, And at the bottom of that first big paragraph, it says, we tested this device at a distance from the body. So if you're using the device the way they give it to us, what they're not telling you is they have put a separate antenna in there for all the different services that they've introduced us to: cellular and data, Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, locator, hotspot, 5G. All these are a separate antenna radiating all the time to make or maintain a handshake with the nearest cell tower or router. And once we know that, it makes sense to turn off the antennas we're not using and only turn on the one antenna you need for the shortest amount of time. But hey, they're good guys, right? So you go down another paragraph or two, and it starts with, to reduce your exposure. Basically, once you know you're radiating yourself, don't touch it. They say to reduce your exposure, use a hands-free option. So they have warned us in their legal fine print all along, but who's ever read that, right? So when I was starting to learn this, it was hard for me to get my head around something that's invisible. And so I learned that there are radio frequency radiation detection devices, and I'll give you a live demonstration on this one. It's called the Safe and Sound Pro 2, and it was recommended at the EMF Medical Conference for physicians and other healthcare practitioners to bring into their practice. We have a doctor here on the North Shore in Beverly, Massachusetts, who bought one. She charges her patients $10, so they take it seriously, and says, you've got 2 hours. Now go home, do your scavenger hunt, see what's radiating and at what levels, bring that data back, and I'll tell you what to do. So here in my home, knowing what I know, I've worked pretty diligently to keep it in the green zone. And on the middle number here, it's called the max. It's that maximum spike of radiation. How much are we getting hit with radiation? They want us to be indoors no more than 100, but in our sleeping areas, like our homes, they want to see it at 10 or less. And the unit of measurement is something called a microwatt per square meter. So basically, in 3 feet of air, how much radiation? We want to be at 10 or less. In my home right now, I'm at 3.9. So it's not rocket science to fix. You just got to plug Ethernet cables back in and buy the little adapters to each one of your devices, and we'll teach you a little more about that. But I want to show you what happens when I take my cell phone out of airplane mode and all those antennas, sorry, that's loud. All those antennas start coming online. And as each one powers up, we are, oh boy, I'm going back into airplane mode, but it retains the high measurement. We went from 3 to 3,180,000 microwatts. 3 million. And I
And
wasn't even
that's
doing
really
anything.
common. And if you have a 5G phone, you're typically going to see your phone sustaining at 3.5 million. And can you imagine wearing that in your pocket or against your breast all the
Mhm.
time? We're fortunate that there are some organizations around the world that have created some safety standards. And the Building Biology Institute has suggested no more than 10, like all of our fingers, microwatts per meter square. And we're going to talk about those solutions.
Yeah.
It's very possible to do, but it just takes some intentionality.
It does. And here's one thing, when I fell down the rabbit hole and I'm like, well, we can measure this stuff. So I used to be the grant coordinator for our schools. I knew we had a grant in our town. And so I went after a grant. I'm thinking, hey, let's put one of these meters on loan in the library. Let's get one for the schools. We'll do our gap analysis and fix it, right? I mean, it sounded so simple. So I became the first in the nation to put a radio frequency detection meter on loan in a public library. And now a lot of people across the country are doing it. So I did mine back in 2016, pre-pandemic. And now that technology has become so popular, people aren't going to their local libraries anymore to take out a book like they used to, because they're just reading it on their devices. or they're just watching stuff on their devices. So libraries are reinventing, and most libraries today have a library of things collections. They might have an air monitor, they might have a stud finder, whatever. You can borrow stuff from your library. So it's not a big ask today to say, hey, could we please get a radio frequency meter? I would highly suggest you get one like this because somebody else had one in a library that was only, but this is a $400 device. We put it up against a $100 device that one library had, and it was missing a lot of the signals. It wasn't catching them. So,
Yeah. And that grant from the Environmental Health Trust requires a match, but it's a great deal. They also have another meter called the millimeter wave meter,
mhm.
which is a 5G, the high end of 5G. And that particular meter is not going to be as useful if you don't live in a very highly densely populated urban area. But for the majority of us, this Safe and Sound Pro 2 and being able to take advantage of this grant program are
Yeah.
a great
So it
idea.
can't be us that contacts the Environmental Health Trust. It needs to be your librarian. So, but like in Massachusetts, our fiscal budget year starts July 1. So that's the perfect time to go talk to your library because they just got their fresh budget, right?
Great.
So just know, and I think their grant fund goes through November. So if you're going to ask for help getting this, if they say, gosh, we can't really do, 400, but maybe we could split it and do 200, talk to the Environmental Health Trust and they'll make sure you get one. Okay. So what is wireless radiation and why should we even care? What happened when we went from corded landlines to all of this wireless technology? So let's put it into numbers. So we talked about these electromagnetic fields. The Earth has its own electromagnetic field, and there was a scientist named Schumann who figured out Schumann's resonance and discovered that the Earth pulses this beautiful healing energy to all living creatures 7.83 times a second. And in science, a second is called, one revolution is called a hertz. So 7.83 hertz is what we're meant to be synced up to. We got so fancy with digital tech that we started adopting technology in the megahertz range. That means 1 million times per second, we're getting jackhammered with microwaves. And now, as Mary Anne said, now that we're getting into 5G, fifth generation technology, a lot of that is using the megahertz range plus adding on these new signals in the gigahertz, which is 1 billion times per second. Our poor cells are getting this. And it's no wonder people don't feel right anymore. And with great thanks to Dr. Martin Blank, who was with Columbia University, he's one of the scientists. In a word, we're being overpowered. This is so not natural to our biological cells that it's causing us to crash in many different ways. So that's a great book from Dr. Blank as well.
Dr. Blank was one of the founders of the EMF scientists, the International EMF Scientists. You can go to International EMF Scientist without an S.org and find his stunning statement. He passed away several years ago, but his son, R. Blank, is about to put out a new book called Empowered,
Oh,
Legitimate EMF Protection. And I'm honored to have been one of his reviewers. And I'm hoping we're going to see this out in the next few months. And it's going to be on Amazon. And we'll let you know when it comes out.
I love that he named it Empowered.
Me
That's
too.
fabulous. Okay. So when we talk about, we won't get too scientific here, but some people will say, oh, all these man-made radio frequencies are fine because they're all down in the non-ionizing end of this thing called the electromagnetic spectrum. That tells us how long the wavelengths are and how frequently they're coming at us, right? So industry for many years had said, oh, it's not ionizing. It can't break the atom like the sun or X-rays or gamma rays and all that. That's kind of how they got away with this. They're saying at the non-ionizing level, it must be fine. But all this science that we're about to review with you is happening at the non-ionizing end of the spectrum. It's in the microwave spectrum here. And it's everything from our cell phones, the cell towers, the smart meters, the utility smart meters, baby monitors, satellites. It's everything that's using these man-made energies. So what does the science tell us? I'm going to do a quick overview of the long term and the short term, and then I'm going to turn it over to Mary Anne, who's going to tell us what the mechanisms of harm are. What have we learned in this science? So this is what we know is happening. Child and adult cancers. As Mary Anne said, the U.S. National Toxicology Program, which has been the gold standard in toxics research all over the world, did the largest study they've ever done on anything on cell phones. They started 2 decades ago to see if cell phones could be fine. They went in expecting to find it. It was all just dandy. And instead, at the end of the day, they found clear evidence of cancerous tumors and DNA damage. Now, clear evidence is the highest of 5 categories that they could assign. And that's what this is here. And anybody's welcome to go look at this. And then just this spring, a World Health Organization funded study looked at that NTP study and others from around the world, and they are now saying there is certainty that this is a carcinogen among other harms. So DNA damage, it was the infertility studies that got me on my feet. When I started reading the science, they had taken male human sperm and exposed it to a laptop with the antennas radiating, and it changed the DNA, which is our roadmap to grow a proper anything from a baby to a pollinator to a plant. So it changed the DNA, it slowed the motility or the movement of the sperm, and it caused apoptosis or programmed cell death. It was basically killing off the sperm in just 4 hours of exposure. And I'm like, you
DC
got,
has added the links. I think you've added the links here, right? People can
yeah,
when you get these. And
yeah.
and for more studies on fertility, you can go to the
Mhm.
babysafeproject.org, and there are hundreds of physicians and practitioners on there that have signed on
Yeah.
to why this is harmful for fertility and for both men and women.
Yeah.
And you'll see the statements by Dr. Hugh Taylor, who's the chair of OBGYN
Mhm.
at Yale Medical School, and at New Haven Hospital. Yeah.
Yeah, very good. So yeah, as Mary Ann said, we have the studies on women too, causing higher miscarriage rates. There was a great study done out at Kaiser Permanente that was never even challenged by the industry. Neurotoxicity. So we were at epidemic levels of anxiety and depression among children even before the pandemic. And then what did we do? We handed every student a wireless tablet to spend 2 years in a pandemic with no safety testing and oftentimes unfettered access because mom and dad were trying to work, right? Um, this is one of the studies that Mary Ann was talking about with Dr. Hugh Taylor down at Yale. He exposed pregnant mice to cell phone radiation, and when those mice gave birth to the pups, they started exhibiting behaviors much like a child with attention deficit or hyperactivity disorder. And then Dr. Martha Herbert founded the Autism Lab at Massachusetts General Hospital, and she sees huge connections between the families that she's cared for and what we know happens with this radio frequency microwave exposure. Alzheimer's used to be, you get into your 80s or 90s, you might get diagnosed. Then it started happening in our 70s, our 60s, our 50s, our 40s, our 30s, and even in some cases, people in their 20s are now getting diagnosed. And as Dr. Martin Blank taught us, we can't continue to pollute the environment of the brain and expect to have the outcomes we once had. So, we'll talk a little bit about why we don't hear about this very often, but we're so very grateful when well-known groups start talking about this. And the Environmental Working Group is one of those groups. I learned about them as a mom when I was feeding my family because they always put out a pesticide fact sheet every year called the Clean 15 and the Dirty Dozen. And they have gotten funding to put a PhD on staff to address the wireless radiation issue. And they have some very nice fact sheets This one is protecting kids from wireless at home and school. They've got another one on neurotoxicity. So know your audience. If you're going to open this conversation with someone else who you think already is a fan of the environmental working group, by all means, pull these fact sheets down and print them out and give them something. And then with great thanks to Dr. Om Gandhi and his colleagues, they've done modeling as to how much radiation goes into our brain when we use a cell phone. So this diagram here, these heads are tilted sideways and the little yellow dot is the ear. On our fully formed skull, we're microwaving about a third of our brain. On a 10-year-old child, it goes through about 3/4 of their brain. And on a 5-year-old child, it's radiating almost the entire brain of that child. And they have thinner skulls. Their brains have a higher water content. And so molecularly, it's doing a bigger number on the cells in their brain. So we've got to step it up. We can't just say, oh my gosh, I'm so overwhelmed with everything. This is a big one for our children. And we're here to help you. We will hold your hand the whole way. We'll present with you, but we've got to step it up. And it's not just the excessive screen time, it's the radio frequency. So those are some of the long-term things, the cancers, the infertility, the neurotoxicity. But time and again, when I give one of these presentations, people come back and say, Cece, I didn't want to know about this. I live on my device, but I recognized quite a few of these symptoms. So here are some classic microwave sickness symptoms, or what we're now calling electromagnetic radiation syndrome or EMR syndrome. Please know that the Americans with Disabilities Act has recognized electromagnetic radiation syndrome for many years now. So we're not just making this stuff up. It just doesn't get the time it needs. Insomnia. I don't know about you, but when I was a kid and I was a teenager, sleeping is what I did best, right? Not so much for the kids today because they've got all this invisible pulsation going on. Headaches, stabbing, searing headaches, migraines, nosebleeds, ear bleeds. Talk to teachers today in schools. We might have used one box of tissues the entire school year. Ask your teachers how many boxes of tissues they're going through for nosebleeds and vomiting and all that fun stuff. Chronic fatigue, where you're just so tapped out, and pain from unidentified sources. So Mary Ann's going to talk about physiologically what we know is causing that. Skin abnormalities, heating, flushing, tingling, the hot ear, and then our poor electrical organs, irregular heartbeats that are going too fast or too slow, tachycardias, people feeling like somebody's sitting on their chest. We are being overpowered. Cognitive impairment, where, it used to be you'd open the fridge and go, what did I come in here for? Right? But now so many people, including children, are getting so forgetful or they can't carry a thought. And then one of the most heartbreaking things that I learned at the EMF medical conference is that several of the doctors and scientists said, look, if we don't get ahead of this, we can expect to see many more of these outbursts in our society like we've been seeing with the mass shootings, etc., because it is physiologically changing the gray matter and the white matter of the brain.
And
Where,
I'll talk a little bit about that on the effects on the brain,
yeah,
Cece, in that slide that I
okay.
have.
So when I remember here in the Boston media market, after the kids came back to school from the pandemic, in like 1 week, I saw 3 different stories at different schools where these kids lost their mind and were wailing on their classmates with a Chromebook. And I shared that with a woman at my yoga studio, and she happened to be a counselor at the high school in Framingham, the town next to me. And she said, oh my gosh, one of my colleagues is out on disability because one of the boys lost his mind and beat the tar out of her with his Chromebook. So it's not if this is going to happen, folks. This is happening. We just were never taught to connect the dots back to our technology. And then, like I said, anxiety, depression, suicidal ideation, higher than we've ever seen in adults and children. I was honored to co-host here in the United States something called World Electromagnetic Radiation Sensitivity Day 2025. So if you just want to hear it from people who are actually suffering from this, We held everybody to about 2 minutes so we could get a lot of people to tell their stories, but this kind of brings it home. What people are suffering from, what hacks they've come up with to try and exist in this world today, but it's happening and it's growing rapidly. Um, so Mary Anne is now going to take the screen and tell us what physiologically is happening with this radiation.
Thanks. And I'm just to want to tag on for just a second to the electromagnetic radiation syndrome. There are millions of us now around the world that deal with this, and I deal with these symptoms far less than I did 15 years ago. But really, the most important thing related to those of us that are dealing with a lot of these symptoms is that we really can serve, if you're willing to hear it, as the canaries, and the canaries in the gold mine, now really gold rather than coal, are here to sort of issue the clarion call that while we can experience these things in both an acute and chronic manner, we're here to share that for those who are going to be exposed to this for a lifetime, particularly our children, the risks are much higher. So in 2023, Dr. Deborah Davis from the Environmental Health Trust, or ehtrust.org, Dr. Linda Birnbaum, who was the former director of the National Toxicology Program that found clear evidence of carcinogenesis, and other researchers and EMF scientists put together a review paper that is listed in I put two handouts in the chat. One is called Safe Tech Tips, and it has those steps from the American Academy of Pediatrics about how to use your cell phone more safely, and then some other additional steps that we as building biologists use. But on the flip side of that handout are some of the most important studies, including this study on the vulnerability of children. The other handout that is in the chat is why children are vulnerable and what schools can do about it. And I encourage you to print that off for your school. Print it in color if you can, because then they get this stunning image of how the radiation comes into the child's brain. And that handout has information that distills this very complicated review article. It has very specific tips that school administrators, school nurses, and mental health counselors and school IT directors can use to make schools safer. And I'm going to walk through some of those steps in a little bit. But as Cece said, the vulnerability of children has so much to do with more fluid on the brain. They have more stem cells that are rapidly dividing, and those are more vulnerable to all toxins. Their reproductive systems are developing. And of course, we know that a baby girl is going to be born with all 30,000 eggs that she will ever use, right? And if she's holding that tablet, that phone up to her belly, all of those eggs are potentially going to be affected. And then the nervous system is the most sensitive system of the body to wireless radiation. And children have limited myelination. That coating over the neurons is really limited when they're babies and they're young. And so they are just far more vulnerable to this absorption. And it was, nearly 15 years ago that I learned that the bone marrow of the skull absorbs 10 times more radiation than in adults. But it's stunning to hear that the hippocampus of the brain, the center for learning and memory, absorbs up to 30 times more. And we hear so much about declining academic achievement and state and national test scores being lower. But when the center for learning and memory of the brain is being bombarded for some day and night, there is no wonder that this is happening academically. You can go on to the next slide, Cece. So I'm just going to talk. Somebody asked a great question in the chat about why, with fertility, infertility, is it the mitochondria that's being affected, or is it the DNA that's being affected first? And it really comes down to sort of the basis of all of these wide range of health issues. And that is reactive oxygen species from oxidative stress. And before I throw this term at you, I'm just going to say, as a review, right, that oxidation is essentially rust.
Mhm.
This is cellular rust. It's a slow burning, slow motion effect. You can go on to the next
Yeah, I
slide.
love that you said that, Mary Ann. Dr. Cindy Russell founded Physicians for Safe Technology. She's a surgeon out in California. And she said, we are basically rusting ourselves from the inside out with this radiation.
Right. And when we look at chronic disease levels all over the world, it has gone up all over the world. And the basis of these exposures is oxidative stress. Just, Merriam-Webster Medical Dictionary says this is the physiological stress on the body that's caused by the cumulative damage done by free radicals inadequately neutralized by antioxidants, and that is held to be associated with aging. Dr. Dr. Joe Mercola, who wrote a great book called EMF'd that came out in 2020, is famous for saying there's no amount of fruits, vegetables, antioxidant supplements that we can take that counteract the effect of this oxidative damage.
Mhm. Very good.
Next slide. And
Okay.
so in 2016, Dr. Igor Yakamenko from Ukraine published this study. It was a meta-analysis looking at 100 studies of oxidative damage and radio frequency or RF exposure, and found 93% of those 100 studies showed oxidative damage. So while we can say, oh, well, very few people are having these symptoms, the reality is that the majority of studies are showing that the majority of us are having oxidative damage from this exposure. And oxidative stress is the bedrock of all chronic disease. It increases inflammation. It advances aging. It's like the rusting of the cells. And so we're advancing aging. We are suppressing immune function with oxidative damage. We're breaking DNA, and we're increasing our risks of cancer. So that mitochondrial damage, the DNA damage, is all a result of the reactive oxygen species that comes from the oxidation of the cells, the rusting of the cells. Dr. Henry Lay, who is one of the most accomplished EMF scientists in the world, has been keeping up with the whole database since Igor Yakamenko did this meta-analysis. And in May, I'm sorry, that should be a line, 5/7/2025. Sorry for my typo. But his latest update is that in 89% of 402 studies now show the effect of oxidative damage. And you can follow this link to the website of Dr. Joel Moskowitz from from UC Berkeley and the School of Public Health. And he has a website called saferemr.com, and he catalogs all of the latest studies. And then if you really, I'm sorry, not all, the best of the latest studies. And then if you really wanted to get nerdy about this and look at all of the studies, you can go to emf-portal.org/EN for English. And there's a university in Germany that actually does catalog everything. And we now have at least 18,000 unduplicated studies showing the effects of just wireless radiation, which is one type of the 4 types of EMFs or electromagnetic fields that we building biologists can measure. So my passion is around the effects on mood, particularly now as we are in the midst of this epidemic of mental illness among our young people. And this winter, I did a review of about 235 studies on the effect of mood and wireless radiation. And a team of us came to the conclusion that there is no single and simple way to talk about why we have so many studies that show an effect on mood that is really multifaceted, why wireless radiation has so much effect on depression, anxiety, and irritability, which is sort of a precursor to anger that Cece was talking about. So it's not only the oxidative stress, but it's the cellular stress responses that follow that. It's the disruption of our voltage gated calcium channels. That's very, complex physiology. We are in a chronic fight or flight system reaction. The limbic system of the brain is in overactive mode when it's exposed to this. There is actually leakage of the blood-brain barrier. And when I think about like the top 5 studies related to wireless radiation, the findings back in 2001, 2003 by cancer researcher Dr. Leif Salford looked at how these cancer researchers were trying to figure out, how do we get chemotherapy into the brain? Because there's this blood-brain barrier that's supposed to keep all the toxins out. So how are we going to get this toxic chemo in? And what he did after trying a lot of different chemicals was say, well, let me just put a little low dose radiation up to the brain and see if it helps get this chemo in. And sure enough, the blood-brain barrier just opened right up. And so if you can be thinking about AirPods at this point, right? AirPods, when I measure them with my Safe and Sound Pro 2 meter, I will easily see 25 to 50,000 microwatts coming out of that AirPod. Those are in the brain, in the ears for hours, holding open the blood-brain barrier as the radiation goes in. These are super dangerous devices, and any corded headset is going to be safer, but an air tube headset where there's a little ferret bead, they call it, that goes up to the brain that can stop the radiation from going in is going to be helpful. And we want to, if we find those AirPods, or we have, our teens have them, it's a good idea to negotiate a trade so that you can help buy them a pair of corded. There we go. Cece's got
So
a
Mary
pair.
Anne, I'm just going to steal the camera for a second here. This is
Please
what
do.
she's talking about. It's an they're either called hollow tube or air tube headsets. And it's only got rubber on the tip. It's only got rubber on the part that the sound comes up. And then these are the little ferrite beads that she mentioned that break the radiation. And then the wire goes down with a nice long cord so you can put the radiating device as far from you as you can, and only use the one antenna on your device that you need. Turn all the others off in the setting. And it's got volume control and muting and stuff. And we'll give you some resources to where to find this too. So, but a picture's worth 1,000 words, right? So I'll leave you my
Absolutely.
screen
Thank you for
share.
doing that, Cece. Yeah. Tech Wellness is a great company to get one of those from. And
Yeah,
I
less
I
EMF. I think I got these at
yeah, that's a
lessemf.com.
great one. The other things that are going on with the brain are actually structural changes, particularly the hippocampus, like I was just talking about. The neurotransmitters are altered, and it's not just depleting some of them. Some of them are going up and some of them are going down. And it really just reminds me of diabetes, how when someone, excuse me, has diabetes, their blood sugar may drop or their blood sugar may spike. And it's really very similar with neurotransmitters. They're going all over the place with this exposure. And then an increase in stress hormones, particularly cortisol levels, which is our stress hormone.
Right.
And that takes me to the next slide. So with sleep, one of the stunning things about sleep is that the wireless radiation suppresses melatonin production. The only way for us to sleep is for our cortisol to drop, because when the cortisol drops is when melatonin can rise. But with electromagnetic fields, both the wiring in the walls that cause the electric fields in the walls, which cause cortisol to jack up, and the wireless radiation increasing cortisol and suppressing melatonin, it has a profound effect on sleep. And if we were to just Google, like, what is the increase in complaints of insomnia or disturbed sleep, it's astronomical these days, right? And the latest study from the Pew Trust showed that 60% of Americans sleep with their phone next to their bed, and that includes children. So no break all day long.
Yeah.
So lots of sleep fragmentation, sleep disturbance studies. So if you do only one thing tonight, that would be to keep your phone out of your bedroom or help one of your family members. If you've already been doing this, because a lot of you are screen strong people, you get this. Just help somebody else get the phone out of their bedroom. Okay. Personal choice awareness. You go, Cece.
Okay. So with the the introduction of 5G and the Internet of Things, industry is forecasting they'll be happy when we have 200 wirelessly connected devices in our homes. Everything from our appliances now, smartphones and Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, 3G, 4G, 5G routers, cordless phones and cordless headsets, virtual reality, laptops, tablets, printers, mice and keyboards, gaming devices, baby monitors. Ooh, please don't put those near our babies. And even smart hearing aids are like the earbuds, putting a Bluetooth transmitter right up to your brain. So we just need to start looking to see, gee, where are these exposures coming from? And what do I personally have control over, right? And then all the wearables. Again, folks, the message is not no technology, it's safe technology. And something like the wearables, keep it in full airplane mode. Turn off the Bluetooth antenna, turn off the Wi-Fi, put airplane mode on. And then you can still have your clock, you can still have the alarms, you can still have any apps that are downloaded on that device. Same thing with your cell phone. It all works without the radiation if it's on your device. If for a cell phone, you don't need it all day long, put it in airplane mode, set yourself an alarm on there and go active for moments in the day and just check and then go back into airplane mode. You will have reduced your exposure incredibly. So those are personal exposures, but what about at the community level? In our schools, check out the ceilings and you'll find these wireless access points all over the place. The macro cell antennas, the big cell antennas started in industrial parks 300 feet up in the air, and then they started encroaching closer and closer to where we live, where we work, where we play, where we go to school, where we see our healthcare practitioners. The industry has really permeated the market. And now we've got these 5G small cells, and the G just stands for generation, right? 3G is third generation, 4G is fourth generation, 5G is fifth generation. Kind of sounds like just the next thing, but it's very different. It's using all those same wavelengths from third and fourth generation technology and adding on an additional layer of these smaller millimeter waves. So 5G is a really, really bad idea. And because they're using these tiny little millimeter waves, they get disrupted easily by things in the path like trees or snow or rain. And here in an era where we're facing climate change and we want to be cooling our cities with tree canopies, industry industry just comes in sometimes in the dark of night and just lops the trees, puts up these 5G small cell antennas so that their signal can get to your 5G device, right? And this is kind of a sampling of what some of them look like, a thimble up on a pole. Sometimes they're hanging them from the wires. Sometimes they're integrating them into the street lights. And then the utility smart meters, oof. At the medical conference, we heard a number of the doctors say when these smart meters go onto our homes to capture our usage of water, gas, electric, solar, sometimes propane, they talked our towns into getting rid of what were called analog devices. And when I was a little girl, I'm one of 10 kids, and we used to be outside a lot playing hide and seek. I'd be hiding in the bushes sometimes for a long time because there's 10 of us that have to be found. And I just keep myself busy watching those little dials go around and around and around on the electric meter. Well, that was an analog meter. And then the town would send a walker into the neighborhood and they would get the reading and then you would get your bill. Those were safe mechanical devices. Then industry came through and said, hey, we can save your town the cost of that walker and eliminate that and just use wireless signals. So they started mounting these digital meters on our homes. And at the medical conference, they were saying that when these close range things go in, like the small cells, like the smart meters, these doctors are seeing a significant increase in patients presenting with electromagnetic radiation syndrome. So we have bills here in Massachusetts trying to get a no-fee opt-out, and Vermont's already had one since 2012, so it should be done. But again, we're up against powerful industries. And now we're launching thousands of satellites up into the sky that are dropping signal down to connect with your wireless technology in your hand or in your home. So
Do you
this
see? I'm
is,
just gonna. I'm sorry. Go
go
ahead.
ahead, Marianne.
Add a couple things for schools. These cell towers are actually an enormous source of revenue. And I just worked with a client in Virginia who got a freedom of information, a filed for freedom of information with the school board and found that they were the cell tower on the school property was earning the school $45,000 a year.
Mhm.
And so
But
there
at
was a
what
lot of
cost? I mean, when you offset that against all the kids on individualized IEP plans, it's so not worth it. But they've never been given the information that this is a neurotoxin that they're putting on top of their schools.
right. And if you have most people have a smart meter on their home, and where these are the most serious is if they are in your bedroom or your any of your family members are sleeping near these. But on the website of the nonprofit that I run, SafeTechNC.org, if you go to the solutions page and you scroll down to opt out of smart meters, you can actually see how we as building biologists can actually, anyone can wrap your smart meter in aluminum foil, leave a hole out the front or the side away from, a neighbor. You don't want to make the radiation go directly into your neighbor's living room or bedroom, but really narrowing where the radiation is going with aluminum foil, securing it with HVAC or aluminum tape. And that small quarter size hole is plenty of radiation to connect with a local tower.
Okay. Thank you, Mary Ann. So my big head scratcher was why, if this is as bad as we can find by looking at the science, why don't we know about this? So I started my journey in 2012, and then in 2015, Harvard Law School Center for Ethics came out with this amazing free report online called Captured Agency: How the Federal Communications Commission is Dominated by the Industries it Presumably Regulates. And you see the graphic they chose as a revolving door. And that's what a lot of our federal agencies have become. People from industry get the positions in the government, and then they can put forth policies that support their revenue stream rather than protecting public health. So that was like my missing puzzle piece going, oh, you mean there is no cavalry coming to rescue us? And that was the day, one of the days that I figured I better step up as a mom and see what I can do here. And then most of our mainstream media outlets are either outright owned by these industries and their parent companies, or their advertising revenue is so strong that the executives at the networks don't feel empowered to go up against them to do true reporting on this. So we are largely left in the dark. And when you turn on your TV or radio, all you hear are these amazing ads. Oh, 5G, more is better, and on and on. So at Massachusetts for Safe Technology, I built a news page because when we open this conversation, industry by now has trained all of us. As soon as you open your mouth and go, I think there's something wrong with wireless. We've all been conditioned to go, oh, tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist. I don't have to listen to that. So on my news page, for things happening in Massachusetts on this topic, I've got story after story after story of communities that are dealing with this so that it makes it more real at the local level. So folks are welcome to go poke around there. And then remember that $30 million study that our National Toxicology Program did that Mary Anne and I both spoke of? When that found clear evidence of cancerous tumors and DNA damage, that should have triggered public policy to protect us. Now, that study started decades ago with different scientists. The gentleman who was in charge of that at the end of the studies was this Dr. Jeffrey Shuren, and he went over to the FCC and said, let's just keep doing what we're doing. We don't really believe that study. And one might ask, what would possess Dr. Shuren to do that? So then you go see, who is this guy? And you start looking at his background and you find that he's married to a partner in a law firm that represents big tech, big Wi-Fi, big food, big agri, big farm, all of them. So there was a huge conflict of interest there. And he recently retired. Sadly, this corruption goes all the way up to the World Health Organization, where there's two groups that have been working on electromagnetic fields for years. One is the highly qualified scientists. The other is an industry-appointed group that seems to have grabbed the helm. So they have reopened, back in 2011, the World Health Organization determined that this was a group 2B possible human carcinogen. What was missing at the time were the rodent studies. We've now done those studies. And the
A
scientists,
strong rodent study, a strong
yeah,
experimental study, right? They just
so,
wanted a stronger study
right.
than we had at that point. But NTP gave us that, the
Yeah, and
National
then right on the
Toxicology
heels
Program.
of our study here, the Ramazzini Institute in Italy completed another multi-million-dollar study. Ours was on
Right.
cell phones, theirs was on cell towers. So all of it and everything in between, same findings, cancers, DNA damage, and more. So we don't need more science. We can always understand things better, but we need people to step up and start protecting our communities. So
You
because
see,
of those rodent
I'm really
studies
glad
that,
that you said that because Linda Birnbaum, the former director of NTP, said in several of her in several news reports that just the same thing that we don't need more science. We need to work on precautions. And from her perspective, running NTP under that Dr. Jeffrey, what's his name? Sorry,
sure.
um, she said that what the NTP study found should have issued a black box warning, just like we have on some toxic drugs.
Mhm.
But here we are, you know,
So
nine
that's
years
why we
later.
can't wait for public policy to catch
No,
up. We can
no,
protect our families
yeah.
today.
So we're going to keep
So,
talking about protection.
yeah.
Yes.
So, conflicts of interest everywhere. So remember how we talked about the American Academy of Pediatrics and they have their family media plan, and a decade or more ago they came out with a strong statement saying we need to protect kids from this, and now they've backed off. Well, look who's funding them. AT&T, right on their website. And it gets worse. Ericsson is one of the big telecom companies. They got in bed with the Girl Scouts of America and they convinced them to do a badge for 5G and the Internet of Things to get those kids thinking that this technology is just great from little girls up. And worse, the Girl Scouts redesigned the sashes that the older girls wear, and they put a pocket in it for the cell phone to go right on top of their bodies. Let's teach those girls to turn those phones off before storing them on their bodies. We
Mhm.
all reached out to Girl Scouts of America and said, you've got to pull that 5G badge. So that's all the bad news, you guys. Let's spend the next few minutes talking about the good news. Dr. Martin Luther King taught us that when important changes do finally happen in our society, it comes through three channels. One, the public learns about it and gets engaged, and that's what we're hoping to inform on and ultimately inspire through our presentations. Second, it goes through the courts. And third, public policy finally catches up. So we're going to just show you some highlights there, but For us, for the public, it's not rocket science to fix. Here's what Safe Tech looks like. On the back of your router at home, there are Ethernet ports. All you got to do is plug an Ethernet cable back in. Most people have more than one device in their home, so you can get this Ethernet switch. It's like an extension box for electronics. And then just get shorter cables for each one of your devices. Buy the little dongle that goes with it and plug it into your phones, to your laptops, to your gaming systems, your TV, whatever. And then once you've hardwired, you need to go into each device and find those antennas and turn them off. And
And
then
then for
third,
the router,
mhm,
some of the routers you can actually go into the gateway, the online
mhm,
control panel, and turn off the Wi-Fi. And in some routers, you can't. So you all know the symbol for Wi-Fi, that those arcs.
yeah,
And if the light goes off on the router with those arcs, then typically the wireless radiation is off. But I think of Wi-Fi like hairspray. It's going to be most concentrated. The radiation will be most concentrated right where it's at the source where it's spraying out like a bottle of hairspray, and then it's going to dissipate. But it's stunning to me when I'm in someone's home and we're 10 feet away from a Wi-Fi router, and we may still be getting 50,000 microwatts. And if
mhm,
the Wi-Fi router is right next to someone's desk, it may be a couple of million
mhm,
microwatts. So
right.
even if you can't turn the Wi-Fi off the router, even just beginning with moving the router more distant
Mhm,
and unplugging it at night.
mhm. Yeah, when we first got started, we put ours on a timer so that it would protect our sleep at night. But then I realized I can just hardwire my house and run everything through Ethernet cables. So, as Mary Ann said, sometimes you think you've gotten it all, but maybe you didn't. So it's critically important to measure. And some people will go in, some people can afford to buy that $400 meter outright. Others will pitch their pennies in with their loved ones or their neighbors, and they'll get one that they share amongst themselves. Or for those who joined us late, earlier in the slides, you'll find information to do a library program where you can put one on loan in your local library. So measuring is critically important. And for my printer, I was sitting in my office one day feeling like, wow, why do I feel like the earth is sucking me down again? Because I've never felt good under fluorescent lights. So I know my body is telling me information when I'm around these man-made energies. And I'm like, I slept well, I ate a clean organic diet. Why am I feeling like this? Well, my daughter had been home over the weekend and asked to turn on the Wi-Fi for a minute. And I said, sure, make sure you turn it off when it's done. So the little glow light on my printer wasn't glowing. I thought that's cool, but I pulled out my meter and measured and it went right off the charts again. So I looked online for my manual and I found out there were multiple antennas mounted in there. And all I had to do was go into the settings and find them and turn them off one by one and then remeasure. And I was back down to radio silence. So we don't want to fool ourselves into thinking we're doing okay when that cumulative damage can keep happening because we simply didn't measure to make sure we got it all. And so in our schools, every one of those wireless access points has a fail-safe with a couple of Ethernet ports in there. All you got to do is drop a wire down from the ceiling to desk level and plug in with Ethernet cables and adapters, and then go in and once again turn off the antennas and measure. And our friends at techsafeschools.org have a wonderful toolkit there for our schools to teach them exactly what they can do. And Mary Ann's going to tell us some more about that.
Great. Thank you, Cece. So I'm really grateful that about a year and a half ago, I got to produce a webinar with Doug Wood, the executive director of Tech Safe Schools. And that webinar is still on the front of the website of um, SafeTechNC.org. You can find that recording. It's an hour and 15 minutes. It goes through the science and the solutions about how to turn down the dial on the wireless radiation. It provides the whole story. But if you just want the quick and dirty, you can find the handouts that I put in the chat. I'm sorry I hadn't pressed the return key when I put those handouts up. But here's the short of it, is that on the control panel in a school and in a home, if you can go onto your remote control, the remote access of your router, of your internet access, you turn down the power to 10%. It's always defaulted to 100%, and you just turn it down to 10 or low if it only gives you, high, medium, low. Then turn off one of the two radios. Actually, there can be 4 radios, but you turn off everything that says 5.0 gigahertz, and that's both public and private Wi-Fi access
Or
point.
hotspot. I think they call the public one a hotspot.
Right, they can call it a hotspot. We used to do the opposite of we would only keep the 5.0 on, and we turn off the 2.45, which goes farther. But what we have found as building biologists with the many presentations that Shirley and I have been listening to lately, and John Black, who's with us, is that there are so many more high frequencies coming off of the 5 gigahertz that we're now safer to turn off the 5.0 and just keep the 2.45 on.
Mm-hmm.
So your IT director at your child's school can do this. Again, it's in the handout that I provided. And then the other thing that the IT director can do is to reduce the number, the SSID, which is the number of networks. I don't really know all of the language to it, but we do know that there have been, there is one North Carolina district that turned that number down to 3, and it's essentially how many different people can access that at one time. And 3 has actually been an extremely low, the result is an extremely low level of RF radiation. And then there's a final adjustment to a school, they call these actually access points. Mm-hmm. And that is to increase the interval of the beacon signal. The beacon is like the handshake, the invisible handshake. So the less frequently the beacon is shaking hands, the less radiation is being put off. So it defaults generally to 100 milliseconds, and we want to increase that interval, make it longer, to 1,000 milliseconds, or essentially 1 time per second. So those 4 steps, or even 3 of those 4 steps, can reduce the wireless radiation level in a school by 95%. And that's what we have found in Buncombe County, North Carolina, after much persistence, pleasant persistence with our public school district.
That's fantastic, Mary Anne. And the best thing is it doesn't cost the schools a dime.
Not a dime.
And you don't lose
the
connectivity.
IT director. Yeah. The IT
everything's
director
still working the way it always did. But as she said, industry gives us everything 100% full tilt. And now the experimentations have been done. Well, we can take this down more than 90% and still have what we need and reduce the radiation exposure to the kids and the teachers. So it's a win.
I'm really glad that you said that, Cece, because what they are finding now is that rather than having, say, for example, 3 very overpowered wireless access points in a school, it's actually much better connectivity if there is one access point in each classroom that is turned all the way down, as we're talking about here with these kind of adjustments.
Excellent.
Yeah. So we gave you the best, Cece gave you the best option in terms of hardwiring. That's always going to be the safest for your family at home. This doesn't have to be, the best option doesn't have to be fancy. It doesn't have to be run behind, sheetrock, and you don't have to have an electrician come. Ethernet is just their wires. It can be done very simply. I have clients that rent and they just run Ethernet along baseboards and tape it. And, it can be all over the place. It can also be lovely, but you can poke holes and run it up through, attics and crawl spaces, and then putty the the holes so you don't have mice coming up or whatever. But a very good solution just to start with, even tonight, if you're not already doing this, is just unplug the Wi-Fi at night. If you have Spectrum or AT&T or Spectrum in particular, and you've got both a modem or the main where it's coming in and a router, if you just leave the modem on and you unplug the router, that is huge. And it's the modem usually doesn't emit anything if it's not a combination. AT&T will usually has a combination of modem router, but with Spectrum, you can just unplug the router and then just plug it back in the morning. You can also go on their gateway again, on their control panel, and go to parental controls or timing and actually turn it off, set it so that it times off every night at a certain hour and then back on in the morning. And that actually is the most efficient way to do this, because when the system is doing that itself, it's more reliable that it goes back on. If you have, someone, a spouse, you working from home and you have to have it up at a certain hour, I would suggest having the Wi-Fi go back on 30 minutes before you have to be connecting if it's going to cause some stress. And then a better solution still, if you're not able to hardwire yet, is still keep it off at night, but then also add some shielding over that router. And there is something called the signal tamer from Less EMF, which you can see here. It's essentially fabric, shielding fabric that has metal built into it, and it radically reduces the radiation level. If you get the regular strength signal tamer from Less EMF, it will knock it down by about 90%. And then if you get the ultra shielding, it will knock it down like 98%. It'll be hard to connect, but with the 90%, you should be able to connect. Now, neither of these solutions is going to keep the radiation from coming out at you where the device is. So where your laptop is, where your PC is, where it's close to your body, it's still emitting massive amounts of radiation, but at least where it's most concentrated at the router, it's lower. So these are risk reduction methods. These are not perfect, but these are great steps in the right direction to help to reduce the exposure. Another way to do this that's expensive but very convenient is this router, this ASUS router that's sold by Tech Wellness. It's got all these controls already turned down about 90%. On the backside of the router, it's got 4 Ethernet ports. You can also schedule it on an app to turn on and off. You can schedule it to turn on and off at particular times, or you can schedule it to turn off when you feel like turning it off. Like, okay, everyone's done with their homework. It's 7:30 at night. Let's turn this off a little earlier. Or you're home alone during the day. You want to have a little more peace and calm, and you say, I'm turning this thing off until everybody gets home and needs to get back on again. So this can be a really simple way to do this if you've got $400 to spare.
Yeah, and that's great. I think you've got a discount code there too, if anybody
I
wants.
do, right. Protect 10. You can use that.
Excellent. Okay, so those are all things that we can do to take control of the devices that we have direct control over. So that's the first thing that MLK taught us. Then the legal solutions, there are lawsuits happening all over the world around this issue. But again, because our mainstream media is operated by the companies that benefit from this technology, we don't hear about it. Back in 2021, the Environmental Health Trust and Children's Health Defense and other parties sued the Federal Communications Commission because there were 11,000 pages of evidence of harm entered into the public record. And at the end of the day, the FCC just said, we don't need to change our public radiation exposure limits. So we're stuck with these public radiation limits way up here from 1996. And the science is clearly showing biological harm at hundreds of thousands of times below that. But politics are politics. The FCC got sued. The judges looked at all this evidence and said to the FCC, well, how did you determine you don't need to update your public radiation limits? And they just kind of went, well, the FDA said we didn't. And that brings us back to that Dr. Jeffrey Shorin. And so the courts ruled against the FCC. They determined they were arbitrary and capricious. And I had to go look that up. It means they didn't do their homework, they just made it up. And they told the FCC to account for children's vulnerability, the elderly, people with electrosensitivity, people with existing health compromises of any kind, because when you're already down a court and you have all of this radiation coming at you, you're very vulnerable. And the environment. We haven't talked about that tonight, but there's a deep body of science on what it's doing to the birds, the bees, the trees, and every other living biome out there. So the FCC found, or was found guilty by the DC, or the DC Circuit Court of Appeals. But the courts didn't give the FCC a deadline, and it's now been 4 years, and they've done nothing to protect us except introduce more radiation closer with these 5G small cell antennas in the satellite. So there is no cavalry coming, but it's still important to keep working through the courts because eventually we'll get there. But so much harm is happening now. All sorts of amazing things happening all over. Our Board of Health at the state level, they are the first to include in their legal guidelines 4 pages on cell towers. And we have groundbreaking lawsuits happening here in Pittsfield, Massachusetts. For the first time in the United States, a town board of health is challenging the FCC and Verizon in particular, because they think that once something goes into the community, it is the Board of Health's duty to mitigate that. All these protections that these telecom companies have pertain to the application process of where they can put their cell towers. But we're hopeful that as this goes through the appeal process, that they might still see some victory out in Pittsfield. And again, this should have been front page news, all of this, but we just don't hear about it. And there are lawsuits all over the world on all of this. So the lawsuits in the courts are the second piece. The third piece is public policy ultimately catches up to the science. And we help New Hampshire. Oh, I wanted to mention the Make America Healthy Commission put out a Make America's Children Healthy Again assessment a couple of months ago. And for the first time at the federal level, where they're listing the chemical toxins, they list EMFs, 5G, Wi-Fi. So we are getting some attention to this. And so there's always hope, but it's not coming fast enough. So we keep working at those levels, but we need to take care of this for our families today. I was honored to meet with Representative Patrick Abrami and his constituent Deb Hodgson from New Hampshire. They literally drove down from New Hampshire. We sat at my kitchen table for an afternoon and helped him to beef up a bill with very pointed questions. Why have Lloyd's of London and Swiss Re and AM Best long since recognized this is a world-leading risk? And those insurance companies put exclusions in their policies so our towns aren't covered for damages. Our schools are vulnerable. We talked about the legal fine print. Why does that even exist? And why is the FCC ignoring thousands of peer-reviewed science? And why do they only even talk about these thermal or heat-based effects? How much heat does it take to raise the temperature of your skin? Well, it's not about the heat. Heat's bad. But it's these non-thermal, non-ionizing effects that are so well documented in the science now. And why does our country allow 100 times more radiation than certain other countries? Well, because the industry is here. And why is nobody looking at the cumulative effect when you put a child in a classroom with 30 devices that all radiate out like a pebble in a pond, and then all their cell phones, and then all the wearables, and then the smart boards and the wireless access? We have gotten in so over our heads here that it's time to do something. So in 7 months' time, we got this bill passed into law. We brought in a lot of the world leading experts, and they came out with this groundbreaking commission report that documents the conflicts of interest with the industry and our federal agencies. And it makes 15 recommendations to inform the public, to transition our schools away from Wi-Fi, to transition our society away from Wi-Fi for primary connectivity, and use fiber optics, use Ethernet cables and adapters, and site everything far away from where we live, where the cell towers are, keep them off of our schools, off of our houses of worship, off of our medical facilities. They have done an amazing job in New Hampshire. The next step is to take those recommendations, write new bills, and get those enacted into law. And every time we try to enact those recommendations, industry comes in and just trounces us. So there's no cavalry coming. We have got to do the work for ourselves, our families, and our communities. But we have so many great things. Right now, we've got 6 bills in Massachusetts. We lead the nation, and 2 of them are to give us the right to opt out of those toxic smart meters. We've got one to start addressing Wi-Fi in the schools. We've got one to form a commission like New Hampshire did. We've got one to beef up our civil rights so people who are sick can ask for accommodations. And then we've got one to recognize electromagnetic illnesses in our state's illnesses database. So we're working every angle we can think of, but it takes time. And our kids are getting sicker by the day right now. Thankfully, we have these incredible solutions. We've got the EMF Medical Conference that for 2 years offered 24.5 continuing medical education credits. Once the accreditation period expired, we have taken that entire conference with great thanks to the executive director, Elizabeth Kelly, and put the whole thing online at no charge. It was a 4-day conference with world-leading scientists and doctors. Mary Anne and I were brought in to talk about our special areas. But anybody can slot in a 20-minute lecture, a half-hour lecture, an hour discussion panel, and get professionally trained at no cost today. Dr. Cindy Russell, Dr. Joel Moskowitz, and others founded Physicians for Safe Technology, which is highly credible, to tell our doctors, our dentists, our therapists, anybody in the healthcare industry, go out here and listen to what these doctors are telling us. And then for other professionals like engineers, physicists, technologists, architects, when I presented at the National Institutes of Health, there was a call for papers. So Frank Clegg, who's the retired president of Microsoft Canada, he spoke on my panel at the NIH. He pulled together scientists and doctors and building biologists, and they wrote this incredible peer-reviewed published paper, what does actually make a smart and healthy building? And they spell it out for the profession so we know how to get there.
Cece,
Okay.
we have quite a lot of we have a number of questions in the chat,
Okay.
and we've just got 15 more minutes,
All
keeping
right.
people
I'll
for
wrap up
two
in the
hours.
next 5 and then we'll spend the
Okay.
last 10 doing Q&A. So for our schools, there was a series of articles in the New York Times talking about what Silicon Valley execs do. They're sending their kids to schools with no screens, no technology, because they know that is not how to grow a proper child. And they're even going so far as to having nannies sign contracts that there will be no screens around their children while they push it out to our kids. Dr. Holly Grow in Louisiana got a whole bunch of different kinds of doctors together to say this technology is ruining our kids' health and lifestyle, eyes, obesity, attention deficit, all of it. They got a bill passed unanimously to require the state of Louisiana, their Department of Health and their technology area to develop best practices for digital devices. That is really good. They didn't go after EMFs directly, but if you click on the first page where they talk about ear pods and you go to that link, then you get the information from the Environmental Health Trust on the EMFs. Maryland was the first state agency to do this, look at this, and they came up with a fact sheet saying first line of defense is to hardwire. Other countries are taking technology out because their outcomes are not improving. They're going the wrong way. The Netherlands, Finland, Sweden, and many here in the US are finally banning cell phones, as well as others around the world. So This is a letter that I was asked to help with some folks in Los Angeles. They're, I think, the second largest school district in the nation. And in February, they were going to adopt their bell-to-bell ban. And so we were brought in along with Patty and Doug Wood of Tech Safe Schools to help write this letter saying, bravo for recognizing we need to remove those distractions and restore the learning environment. Make sure when you store those devices, you're not just hanging a shoe rack at the back of the classroom and putting all those cell phones and wearables in there because they're going to be radiating the heck out of the children and the teachers. Be sure everything is turned off before it's stored. And once you've completed that, then let's start assessing how we can reduce all the infrastructure and the school issued technology. So that's just a 2-page letter. It's great resources attached at the back. So you can adapt that and you can give that to your schools too. And then, as we've talked about, Tech Safe School has a great toolkit out there. The Massachusetts Breast Cancer Coalition has already written K through 12 prevention curriculum for cell phones and Wi-Fi. So we've got it all. Dr. Alexia McKnight is a radiologist. She and I were brought in to do professional development. We gave 4 sessions in one day. We've got a 45-minute recording right there. We would be honored to be brought in and do this with your schools too. And then, as I mentioned early on, Dr. Mikko Ahonen from Finland and I have developed this online course for mass training that can be done in about an hour, like literally on somebody's lunch hour. And it kicks out a certificate of completion for compliance with your HR department. It kicks out a tip sheet at the end with handy reminders. So we know what to do. So what do we do from here? Let's keep learning. I will promise to do these free webinars every month. Mary Anne has another one coming up. I think my next one is going to be August 27th. It's a Wednesday at the same time. And in the coming days, I will put that up on my website. So keep learning, come back. People come and they say, okay, I'll try one thing. And it works. And then they come back and say, what's the next thing I'm going to learn? So come back as many times as you want. Folks who invented social media in Silicon Valley have done a film that some of you might have seen. It's out on Netflix called The Social Dilemma. And they're saying this is not what we intended. You need to get your kids and yourself off of social media. And then a great partner film for that is Generation Zapped. A little bit of my work helping our schools and the bills and stuff is featured in there. But it took kudos at the United Nations Film Festival. It was awarded Best Documentary by the Women's Film Festival, by the DC Independent Film Festival. So 74 minutes. And this film, Generation Zapped, is included in many of our library streaming services like Canopy and Hoopla. It's out on other streaming services. It's on YouTube, maybe with ads. But get your friends and the parents that your kids hang out with, sit down in your living room together and watch Generation Zapped, and then bring in Mary Anne or I, and we can talk you through what happened since that film was released in 2018, all the good things that are happening today. And then I took a page from Dr. Joel Moskowitz when that NTP study came out that showed clear evidence of harm. He came up with a document that looked a bit like this. It showed all the things that people have been told that aren't actually really fully true, and then all the information that supports what's really going on. So I got Joel's blessing, and I did one called EMF Points of Confusion versus Fact. It's 4 pages, and the last page has that diagram of how all the parts on our body that this is affecting. People say they've printed this out, and when they go to talk to somebody about this issue, they just hand them that because it's got all the resources, and that is posted on my resource page at Massachusetts for Safe Tech. So
I'll
Mary Ann
take
and I
this.
did a
I'll
film.
take this now at this
Yeah.
point. I really want to make sure that we have time for questions. Y'all have been hanging in here a long time, but just very briefly, one of the things that is a really great way to just begin reducing radiation from your cell phone, which is unfortunately probably the biggest exposure of the day, is to take a tech Sabbath. And that could even just be a few hours 1 day a week in which you set the phone aside and begin to engage with loved ones and brainstorm together about the kind of things that you can do together, make something yummy, take a hike, a craft project. But there's a great book that you're going to flip to. Great. Uh,
Oh, it'll come up. So the Centers for Disease Control here in the United States has something called the ALARA principle for radiation. Our goal is to get to as low as reasonably achievable, and there's three simple approaches. One, spend as little time radiating yourself as you can. Two, create as much distance as you can from something that's radiating. And three, if you can't get away from it, learn how to shield. Shielding can be tricky. You don't want to get yourself into a Faraday cage and then have someone walk in and turn on their radiating device because it's going to hit the shield and bounce around and hit you even more. So work with a professional like a building biologist to help us get there. So what can we do? Start noticing your habits and what is radiating. Start with baby steps. Try not to be the newly baptized where you scare everybody around you. And create that sleep sanctuary. The Building
and
Biology
next,
Institute has this great fact sheet, and Mary Anne is an expert with that. And then make your way to plugging in the Ethernet cables and adapters. Put airplane mode on your devices as much as you can. Make sure the Bluetooth and the Wi-Fi are turned off because remember, those are separate antennas. And if you don't physically turn them off, they're going to keep radiating.
these are just the most important principles that we follow in the Building Biology Institute to reduce wireless radiation. Sleep with the phone at a distance, keep the phone off the body, right? Not in the pocket, not in the bra. Use it less and favor hardwired connections.
Okay.
Let's go to the yeah, that's part of our unplugging, our Sabbath. You can go on to the next slide, Cece. I want to make sure that people have a few moments to ask questions. These are a great couple of books on taking a tech Sabbath, as well as the book called How to Break Up with Your Phone. You can keep going, Cece.
Okay.
I just want to share one more resource.
So there's lots of great resources here. We'll leave that for you when I send out our slides tomorrow. So just know we gotcha. We know how to do this and we can help you. You can reach me through Massachusetts for Safe Technology. This goes right to our monthly webinars. You can email me. I'm doing a pilot program with 10 champions across North America. We're getting parents informed, and then ultimately we want to go talk to the schools. I hate social media myself, but apparently it's important to have likes because that carries more credibility. So if you can pop out to Tech Safe School or Safe Tech for Schools on Facebook and just like us, then when we start speaking to the schools, that might show favorably. And then here's our Safer Screen Time course, literally in an hour for about $15 because we need to cover our overhead. We'll do bulk rates for schools and stuff, but we can train everybody today. Back to
And then
Mary
next
Ann.
month, I at the end of August, I'm doing a webinar that is just focused on the sleep sanctuary. And for anybody that's just beginning this journey, it can be a great place to begin to learn about all four EMFs and simple ways that you can really focus down on the sleep sanctuary. I will tell you that there's a lot of questions in the chat about what else we can do for schools. There will be a national webinar that a team of us are doing on EdWeb. It is a network, edweb.net, on Wednesday, October 22nd at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And that will provide continuing education credits for teachers. And it is also for school administrators, for school counselors, and a great opportunity. And then
Excellent. And Mary Ann, do you cover both the social emotional stuff as well as the EMFs?
We will. Yeah, the
Okay.
mood issues will be covered as well. The screen issues will be covered in brief by an expert from Harvard. So we're really excited about this EdWeb website. We've got just a couple minutes. You all have been so patient. Who would like to ask a question first? I did hear things about, what can we do about schools? So we've provided a number of resources. There have been questions about safer phones. So there is a company called Mudita. They worked on a low radiation phone years ago called the Mudita Pure. And one of our colleagues from a company called Shield Your Body has recently told me that their new smartphone called the Mudita Compact with a K um, is doesn't have the blue light. It has much lower radiation. It's still a smartphone. You can continue to use programs like Screen Strong suggests, like Canopy on there to pull off any kind of social media apps or the like. It's a minimalist smartphone, so that's a good one. Anybody want to raise your hand and jump in with some more questions? Emily? Thank you, Emily, for the work that you're doing with your State Board of Education. Love it. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. I'm bringing this next, I think. So,
Great. Well, we're happy to help you in any way we can.
Yes, we are.
There
Okay,
were
any other questions or comments folks would like to share?
so I do have a question. I know, is that for me? Oh, um, obviously with anything when it comes to technology and what you two focus on, how long did it kind of take you to, I guess, get into the brains of decision makers in some of these either schools, CC and Mary Anne? Is it something that might take a year to kind of just gradually let them know, like, hey, these are a problem. Let's just
So
start
here's
thinking
what I
about it.
suggest. One of my biggest lessons, I had all the facts on my side, and I was told, Cece, you're just one voice. They're waiting for higher authorities. So I went to the higher authorities, and for 10 years I've been doing that, and nobody knows. My advice is don't go it alone. Get your girlfriends together, get the other parents together, sit down and watch Generation Zapped,
Okay.
get a coalition formed, and then go talk to the schools and don't back down until they start protecting your children.
I think
Okay.
also, Emily, it did take a good 4 years in our district, and we may be one of the only entire school districts in the US that has lowered the radiation levels, but it was patient, polite persistence.
Mhm.
And we
Okay.
met multiple times with them around the science and brought the meter, and we let the IT director borrow the meter privately and let him play with the gateway. And he was the one who told us about the SSID. So he doesn't like to, he's a closed mouth kind of guy. They don't want to admit what they're doing. But it's they're just doing what the default is. And yet we know that they're based on that finding that everything is connecting perfectly well. So it just takes persistence, and really complimenting them, letting them know that you are so grateful when they make any change. So Doug Wood, who runs Tech Safe Schools, says we need to applaud them for even the smallest changes that they're willing to make. And if they're willing to follow your lead, Emily, of reducing tech use, Tuesdays and Thursdays, like Granville County in North Carolina, putting the Chromebooks away, or Burke County schools in North Carolina deciding that, they're going to put out a proclamation by the Board of Education that we're going to intentionally reduce tech use. All of those steps are in the right direction. But when they can see the RF levels, the radio frequency levels with a meter, it makes all the difference in the world. And so if you can join in with others to purchase one, and have that, and I'm happy to coach you over the phone if you need a little help with using it, and it can just speak for itself.
Great. Great advice.
All
Thank you.
right. So yeah, and
You're
just a
so
reminder, I will be sending out the slides and the recording tomorrow, so everybody will have everything. And just reach out to Mary Anne and I with any questions. We had nearly 100 people register for this, and I knew, this time of day is the witching hour for parents, right? They're doing baths and bed and food and all that. So I just say register, and you can watch it on your own time, and we send everything out afterwards. So please continue to share with your loved ones and your friends and your colleagues. because we are making such great strides with the excessive screen time, but it's time that people learn that that is only half of the issue we need to confront here. And we know how. That's the best news. Okay.
Thank you all so much for coming. We're really grateful for this long time and attention that you've dedicated to this topic.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. Come back again and reach out in the meantime. And I will put you all on my mailing list if you're not already on there so that you can continue to receive our updates. Okay, everyone. Have a tech safe night. Take care.
Unplug
Bye-bye.
your Wi-Fi.
That's it.
Thank you.